PharmaPhobic is powered by Achieve the Lifestyle, a company dedicated to helping you empower your health, redefine your lifestyle, and all for the health of it. You're listening to PharmaPhobic, where we challenge the state of health in America. I'm Janie, a physician assistant, and I've seen how healthcare keeps people dependent instead of truly healthy.
And I'm Dan, a veteran turned fitness pro here to uncover the truth and explore simple and sustainable health solutions. From big pharma to big food, we're exposing the conflicts of interest keeping us sick and finding better ways to take back our health.
No fluff, no gimmicks, just real talk, real solutions, and a little bit of fun along the way.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to another episode of PharmaPhobic, where we help you become the strongest, healthiest, and most capable version of yourself. PharmaPhobic is brought to you by...
Achieve the Lifestyle.
Oh, yeah, it's brought to you by us.
I was just, when you were saying that, I was thinking, welcome to Achieve the Lifestyle. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you're doing the intro because I totally would have messed that up, which we found out in a previous episode I did.
You said, welcome to Achieve the Lifestyle?
No, remember I was like the strongest, most healthiest, most
capablest?
I just butchered it. So that's why you lead in.
But sometimes you lead in with a very like emphatic, you jump in there. I like it. Okay, guys. So today, before we start, we always start with the health news now because there's so much going on out there. It's insane.
Yeah.
And every week, every day, something pops up that you might think is completely unrelated to your long-term health. But trust and believe that some of this stuff will come to haunt you at some point in the future.
It's so daunting.
It's always daunting. I'm just on the lookout.
Haunt you.
I'm on the lookout for the okie doke, and there's a lot of okie doke out there. You know, I think that's by nature. I'm a suspicious person. We've talked about this before. That's a cultural thing, whatever. But I'm just looking. And we want to get you ready. We want you to be stronger, healthier, more capable. So we want to discuss all the stuff that can affect that. But before we get into the gloomy health news or the suspicious health news, and we don our hats, we're going to talk about good health news. Somebody here got their Jiu-Jitsu blue belt.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Somebody here is no longer a white belt. And now that she got her blue belt, she could put hashtag BJJLife on her profile on Instagram.
I will not be doing that.
You're not going to start a jiu-jitsu page anytime soon? No,
good.
start teaching techniques?
Nope.
So that's like the first milestone for those of you that are unfamiliar with jiu-jitsu. Obviously, you move on from white, you go to blue. That's like the first milestone. Now, statistical facts about the blue belt. The majority of people that interface with jiu-jitsu quit at blue belt. They get their blue belt and then they feel like they've accomplished something and they kind of walk away. There's also, I felt like, at least in my journey, and I think a lot of people would agree with that you hit a blue belt and then you get the blue belt blues because the curve for learning and, competition, if you will, gets so much steeper. Because there's like these advanced blue belts, but then there's these beginner blue belts, and you're thinking everybody's a blue belt, and then there's a big disparity in schools and skills amongst the blue belt crew. Especially if you compete, you'll notice that there's some blue belts that are like, yeah, that guy is like gone, and then this guy's pretty fresh. But that's where you grow the most. That's really where you start laying the actual foundation of your, jiu-jitsu career, if you will. So, Janie, welcome to the fray. What do you have to say for yourself now that you're a blue belt?
I'm terrified. Especially from what you just said.
Terry, this is where it gets interesting. It's crazy. If you make it through the blue belt blues, you're gonna be jiu-jitsu.
No, I was talking to our friend Yosef, who we used to do jiu-jitsu with, who is a blue belt, and I was like, I feel like really happy about it, but also like I don't know anything. And he's like, yeah, blue belt's heavy on the imposter syndrome. So that sums it up very well.
You know what? It's funny because when I got mine, I came into it with a lot of hubris, if that's how you say it, a lot of bravado, because I've been around jiu-jitsu a while, like in the army and stuff. And as a white belt, I was kind of like crushing skulls and giving people a hard time. And I felt like and I competed and I placed and I felt like I was like, oh, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into blue belt the same way. Like, I'm going to go in here and hand everybody their butt. It's going to be fine. And then I got my butt handed to me. And like, there was a big exposure of like, discrepancy in skills. And I had to like really taper back and learn a lot of stuff that I probably should have learned as a white belt, but I didn't get to because I was, focusing on being more physically imposing versus actually developing skills. So yeah, it was definitely, that's where the imposter syndrome kicked in. So yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm gonna agree with Joseph.
Yeah,
for sure. So it's adventurous. Yeah. Anyway, bravo.
Thank you.
I think also this is probably something that we probably talk about in the future because I've been around jiu-jitsu a long time and she's been with me a long time, so she's seen me do this, but she never wanted to jump in. And then, and there's probably like life experience there. Like you just felt a certain way about the physicality of it, which, we'll talk about that some other time. But it, eventually you decided to jump in on, which I was surprised. And I just didn't know if you would flirt with it or if you would actually like get into it, but you got into it. So,
oh, you know me. I go all in.
Yeah,
Look at us.
You're
moved in together and across the country 3 months in. I don't flirt with shit. No, I'm kidding.
We wild. We crazy. Every now and then we stop and be like, yo, we crazy.
No one should do what we did.
No one should do what we did. But hey, here we are. So let's get into the health news now that we celebrated Janie. I got one for you here. BlackRock, which if you are a financial person, the name would be familiar to you. And if you are a tinfoil hatty type person like myself, the name is also familiar to you. To the average person, the name BlackRock probably doesn't ring any bells.
But I'm sure everyone is very well involved with them unknowingly.
Oh, everybody's involved with BlackRock unknowingly. So BlackRock, for the uninitiated, if you're not a Wall Street person or a tinfoil hat person, BlackRock is an asset manager. It's the biggest asset manager in the world.
Asset. Okay. You sound like you said acid manager.
No, I said asset. Assets. Meaning they are big investors. They're big shareholders in multiple companies to the tune of over 13 trillion. TR. Trillion dollars. So what does BlackRock do? They basically buy shares of most companies in the world, and I'll start saying some companies here in a bit, and you'll be like, holy crap. They don't buy all the shares, they buy the majority. Meaning, so what does it take to be a majority shareholder in said company? Is it 10%? Because everybody else holds 1, they hold 2, they hold 5, so they'll buy that. Boom. Now, companies that are under management that BlackRock is a majority owner in, you're talking Apple, you're talking Walmart, you're talking Microsoft, you're talking Pfizer. So big Fortune 500 companies. Essentially, when you lay it out, BlackRock owns a little piece that gives them majority in everything. If it makes money, they're a part of it. Okay? So BlackRock currently, now the other company involved in this is UnitedHealthcare, which everybody should be familiar with UnitedHealthcare right now because of the assassination of their former CEO in the streets in New York. Dude got shot by this Luigi Manglione, whatever the hell his name was. Crazy hit. It was a mob style type hit, and nobody's condoning violence here, but supposedly this kid, because he's young as hell, killed him because UnitedHealthcare was denying a lot of claims. Basically, and he was one of them where they're putting in claims for health insurance, whatever, cancer, all these crazy things, and they're denying it. So people are essentially having to come out of pocket for a lot of expensive treatments, and they're paying for healthcare that they're not, or for healthcare insurance that they're not really receiving anything in reciprocity. So BlackRock is a majority owner in UnitedHealthcare. Now, supposedly after the assassination of the CEO, UnitedHealthcare started changing their practices and they started approving more stuff. Oh, look at that. You're giving people what they paid for. And they started approving more claims. What did that do to profits? Brought the profits down. So BlackRock is suing, supposedly, allegedly, UnitedHealthcare. The cover here is because they lied about their status after the assassination of their CEO, meaning they're saying, no, we're making money still, but they're really not. And the reason is because they started approving more claims. So BlackRock is suing them over loss of profit, basically. Okay. Now, why is that important here? What does that tell you? Obviously, these people, any business, we're all in business to make money. You want to be profitable in your endeavor. But this business model that UnitedHealthcare had and that was benefiting BlackRock as a shareholder is basically based in not giving people healthcare insurance, the insurance that they need.
That's how you make more money.
Because they get to keep more money. Right. So you're paying out a bunch of healthcare insurance.
Well, you're paying your premiums, but then they're not approving any payments to you. So they're keeping
so
your
their
money.
Profits are bigger. So their bottom line is dependent on not giving people access to healthcare, right?
And one way you could do that is you could, BlackRock or UnitedHealthcare could help providers figure out ways and help the general public be healthier. Therefore, they don't utilize healthcare as much. So that's a way to decrease cost.
True.
And increase profits.
Now you're
but using... that's a little too altruistic for somebody like BlackRock.
You're using logic too. And another thing that would happen, profits would go down anyway because people wouldn't be using their healthcare insurance as much. Therefore, you'd have to lower the premiums. So you'd be making less money. So you're really what we're getting at here, guys. This is the contention here, and this is the point that if you haven't, if you walk the dog on this, you should be able to reach this logical conclusion that healthier people are not of value to the system. Financial systems to the tune of billions and billions of dollars have been built on disease. Make sense? And you paying for the possibility of getting sick or these sort of things and managing diseases chronically, not just curing them, because that's a one-time thing and then you're out. You're not a recurring revenue type thing. Every business, needs recurring revenue.
At some point, my brain just starts to hurt because the cost and the money and how much healthcare costs, how much we spend for services, how much med school costs, how much providers get paid, all this, it's all made up. Yep. And then at some point, my brain just is like, we're just in a simulation. This is all this is.
No, well, we're definitely we're in a pickle. At a minimum, it's a huge pickle, but it's definitely it's the Matrix.
Yeah,
and it's a huge pickle. You have medical professionals that go to medical school to make something of themselves with all these altruistic, feelings like, hey, I'm going to truly help people, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to take out these student loans and go into debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars so that I can get this title, so that I can get this job that's going to pay me fairly well. But is it going to pay me well enough to get out of that quick? Nah, I don't know about that. But then I'm kind of enslaved to the system because I carry this debt, so I have to do it the way they want to, even though in my heart I feel like there's a better way. And you're trapped in this hamster wheel of just dookie, if you will.
Yeah, which is why physician suicide rates are so high.
There you go. That's something that we should definitely talk about because that's important. That's these highly educated people resorting to suicide is. That's alarming. And, obviously suicide affects a large swath of the population, but whatever.
Anyway,
we'll definitely talk about this. So, this ties into the next part. Goldman Sachs. There's a Goldman Sachs report out there on biotech companies. And there's a lot of emerging technology in the biotech space, mainly around gene therapies, right? So, listen, look at me right here in my eyes. Gene therapies, I don't know, man. There's a lot to consider there. You're playing with a lot. But supposedly there's a lot of emerging technology where, one shot, one of these therapies, and you alter genetic code and you cure diseases like that, one shot, okay? Be it a vaccine or be it whatever therapeutic thing that they're do, and hey, this disease is done. Hepatitis, some cancers, whatever. So Goldman Sachs was studying this, and their report on it is, they're posing the question, is it a good idea to get into a business where you're curing diseases? Why? Because you're not creating recurring revenue. You know, the recurring revenue is in, hey, you're a diabetic, and I put you on insulin, I put you on metformin, I put you on Ozempic, I put you on whatever, and you're a recurring cash cow. Boom. Like, hey, you need this treatment every month, you need this every week, and, you know, I'm making money off you for the rest of your life, right? But imagine if there's, I don't know, something out there, some therapy you could do, and boom, you're no longer a diabetic.
I think a more specifically related gene altercation example would be like sickle cell disease, right? So if somebody has sickle cell disease, what does that mean? Well, they tend to have very acute joint pain, and they are not allowed to do athletics, right? So that's why it's screened for in sports, especially the higher level you get. And so take somebody with sickle cell, they're told they have to be very careful with physical activity. So a lot will just say, no, none. Okay. If they have, a sickle cell crisis, they're in acute pain. So they're going to be given opioids more often than not. And so they're going to be utilizing healthcare more frequently on an emergency basis, which the cost is higher than that, right? They're going to be required to follow up longitudinally with like a primary care provider, somebody who knows them, they're established with, right? So for continuity of care, and they're not going to be as physically active as they otherwise would. So then the increased risk of being sedentary then puts them at increased risk of chronic illnesses, diabetes, high blood pressure, and then the sequela of those, kidney disease, peripheral artery disease, neuropathies, all these things, right? Okay. If you did a gene therapy and cured the sickle cell before all of this potential stuff, I know this isn't across the board for everybody. Now this person is able to be active and not utilizing care, not utilizing emergency services, all these things. And so I think that that's a really good example of a possible somebody sick with sickle cell utilizes a lot of healthcare dollars, somebody who you
hit them with the gene therapy and it's done.
Therapy cure sickle cell utilizes much less healthcare dollars.
Even type 1 diabetes would be an interesting one here. So obviously, you know, that we take the good, you know, people with sickle cell, type 1 diabetes, that sort of thing, rheumatoid arthritis.
No, we're saying that this could potentially be good, but I can understand how from a financial perspective, and if that's all you're worried about, it's not a good business model, which then if you take a step back, is curing anything or improving anything, even if it's a lifestyle related healthcare issue, profitable? It's not.
Yep.
And so then somebody who says, well, you know, these pharmaceutical companies, the government, all these things, they're not trying to intentionally make people sick, because I've been told that when I say, hey, specifically with, you know, Pfizer, I had a family member who was like, Pfizer's not bad. They're not trying to. And I'm like, I disagree, because I don't think that they're actively trying to make people healthier, because that would make their profits much less.
Yeah. And you got to think about it, you know, again, back to the Warren Buffett quote, and you'll hear us say this a lot. Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. Okay, the incentives are endless amounts of revenue to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. Disease doesn't just make a couple $1 million here and there. It makes billions and billions and billions of dollars. It is literally the most profitable endeavor, business model in existence, okay? If you start seeing what cancer makes and all this other stuff, you know, managing cancers and all this other stuff, it is a lot of money. So how much chemo costs, all this sort of things. So if you've built a large swath of the economy on dealing with a problem, are you incentivized to solve it when your entire business model is, if this problem ceases to exist, I no longer am employed. No. I no longer make money. You're not. This is why our questions here at the PharmaPhobic podcast linger around, first of all, we go past the, oh, this thing's coming out and it's going to help you deal with this. We want to go beyond that. Why is this thing a problem to begin with? Okay. Why is cancer so prevalent nowadays? Why are people getting younger and younger and getting cancer? That's where the true answers are. Because imagine if we hey, we've been putting this on our food and it's causing all these sort of genetic mutations and giving everybody cancer. I'm choosing an example, although there's a play here, glyphosate, hello. But, we've been exposing ourselves to these and these chemicals, and it's complicating things for people, causing cancers. And then you take that out and boom, cancer drops by 10, 15%, whatever, 20%. Lord knows. That's where we want to go. And that's where I think, the energy of research would probably be best directed versus just focusing on, hey, what new medication can we hit people with and make a lot of money off to deal with it, to manage it versus putting the kibosh on it. Make sense? And now with this BlackRock United thing, you can start seeing how incentivized these people are and these companies are to basically keep you, they benefit off large amounts of ill people. And it's unfortunate. So what can you do about it? Hey, you got to manage your lifestyle. You got to break free from the system. You can't just outsource the responsibility for it and be like, oh, if I get sick, I'm going to go over here and they're going to help me. You got to help yourself, people. That's the whole thing. That's what we're trying to beat into people through this podcast. Every time we open our mouths, we're going to talk about how you need to be in charge of your own health. You feel me? Moving on from there. Here's speaking of cancers and stuff, there's some curious study that had just got published. It's a meta-analysis, meaning when you hear the word meta-analysis, they basically took a bunch of studies that were already out there and they analyzed the results of that as part of their study, and they came up with a conclusion so it's a study of multiple other studies. And they're talking about the association between cancer going into remission, if you will, so cured of cancer, I'm doing air quotations, and the relationship that has to people who actually exercise. So basically a relationship between exercising and the cure of cancer. Now there's a reduction in the risk of death to people that were diagnosed with cancer and they kept working out.
Yep.
And people who were diagnosed with cancer and they were already working out, so they were pretty physically active and they just maintained that, they basically had a reduced risk of death to the tune of over 25% and 30-some% in some cases. Now, when you're fighting a life-threatening illness like a cancer, that shit's got to be scary. If you get a 1% chance in your favor, wouldn't you take it? You get a 10% in your favor. Would you take that?
Yeah.
So when we start talking about 25, 30% in your favor of beating the damn thing, man, that's significant.
Yeah. So I think that's multifactorial. So we do know that some forms of exercise, especially like high intensity exercise, has a role in autophagy, right? So
define autophagy for
so
the
autophagy
uninitiated.
is the cells self-destruct when they're old, or mostly when they're old, because old cells tend to then make mistakes and then turn into
when they replicate. Yep.
Yeah, replicate. And so turn into cancer, excuse me. The other thing is I haven't seen these studies, so I don't know what they talked to, like people who received treatment or not, or things like that. I don't know. But most treatments for cancer, chemotherapy, they destroy everything, right? And so it's very hard on people, even no matter your health, you take a hit, right? So to your point, if you're stronger, more robust prior to therapy, you're going to handle it better, right? And also, if you exercise during treatment, you're going to try to maintain some of your health, your muscle mass, your immune system, your robustness, okay? Now, throughout cancer, just the treatments and the side effects of the treatments, because most chemotherapies cause nausea, decreased appetite, you're vomiting, you don't really want to do anything, you're tired, and then you get into this fatigue cycle. And so it causes cachexia, which is the wasting syndrome. So you literally waste away while you're on chemotherapy, okay? obviously different. I'm not a chemotherapy pharmaceutical expert by any means. So different combinations or drugs will cause different levels of this. But if you are stronger, more robust, and then you get hit and you waste away, you have more of a bank to pull from.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you work out during it, you're trying to maintain, and you can actually break that fatigue cycle, which I'm trying. I have a family member who's currently being treated for cancer, and he's in the fatigue cycle. And I'm like, you have to move your body. You have to do something. I know it's not comfortable. I know you don't want to, but you have to break this cycle, and this is the way to do it. And so, yes, I 100% can get along with, and I've seen it. I've seen people who go through chemotherapy and do not exercise, and I have seen them literally waste away before my eyes. They're still alive, excuse me, but they deteriorate. And I've seen people go through chemotherapy and they like get after it still, and they're better off for it. So yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, and you know, we talk about autophagy. That's very common in fasting as well, which, you know, if you go back in medical history, you know, aggressive fasting protocols were also used to treat cancer. And, you know, you get autophagy, you start killing these, you know, cells that are kind of old and useless, and they might be filled with toxins, you know, whatever it may be that's initiating this cancer process. So it computes. I also go to the example of Incledon, the Tom Incledon from Cosenta Wellness, who supposedly I've had multiple opportunities to hear him speak on this. And supposedly he's got one of the best rates in the country for putting cancer into remission with his patients. And he basically says it's exercise and food. So, you know, if he can get people to exercise and hold on to weight while they're going through their treatment, the chances of them going into remission skyrocket. If he can't do that, then they usually end up getting beat by cancer. And he uses exercise. He's got coaches, and they, you know, whatever you can do. They use a lot of an arc trainer, which is basically, you've probably seen them at your big box gym. It's an elliptical, but it has like resistance, and your feet are floating. They're not on the rails. And you could crank up the resistance on that thing, and they find a resistance setting where people have to like muscle it. And they start with whatever they can handle. Hey, you got 30 seconds? We're going to do a couple rounds of 30 seconds, you know? And then they dial it up until these people are, you know, really going on there. And the idea is for them to help them maintain and maybe even gain muscle mass while they're dealing with this. And the people that successfully do this, you know, they can start eating more, boom, and go through this resistance training regimen wherever they are physically that they can do. Their chances of survival are really high. And that's something to consider there. There's a lot behind that science there.
Yeah.
Or hopefully for the future of cancer treatment, you know, because I mean, shit, man, this stuff it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, you know, we've said this before about just doing things that you can be physically capable to do. So don't, you know, we stay ready so we don't have to get ready. I think, and some people may be like, oh, this is a little bit extreme, but I think that applies to life, right? You stay ready so you don't have to get ready, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. You may get hit with cancer, an injury, you know, something. I mean, the probability of that happening is just, for everyone, is going to experience something in their lifetime, even if it's just like a broken ankle or something, right? So different degrees of severity, different sources, whether it's an accident or a more long-term illness. Now, but if you take care of yourself on a day-to-day, and going back to like just, you know, you walk around with robust amounts of energy, muscle mass, and, you know, you're ready, right? And so that if something hits you, you're more apt to handle it, okay? And so I think that that's just, it's important because we want to be here for a good time, and we want to be here for a long time, but we also want to be able to weather whatever comes our way more seamlessly than if we were just sitting on our couch all the time doing nothing. And now our body is subjected to something hard and we don't even know what hard is because we've just been really comfortable forever.
Yeah, I mean, you're building a house essentially, and you want a house that can weather storms and that can weather hurricanes and the tornado and all this stuff.
It's like the Three Little Pigs.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. It's like, hey, you're building the cinder block house, you know. Meanwhile, if you're taking a passive approach to your health and wellness, then you're building a freaking whatever the little hay house the first piggy built, and it just blows over.
So to this, and jumping back to the BlackRock, I started listening to Ninjas Are Butterflies podcast.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is hilarious and
Fellow
it's great.
tinfoil hatters.
Yeah,
I love
if
it.
you guys check them out, because I've just really enjoyed listening to them. I've been following them on Instagram for a while, so to see their shorts, you know, but I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I not just listening to their, so I started listening. And the woman on there started talking, and I want to read this book. She's reading a book about how tuberculosis has kind of shaped everything in our world.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to give a quick example, the assassination of the Archduke
Franz Ferdinand,
World War I. And I haven't fact checked this, but in the book he says the two teenagers or whatever that assassinated him, obviously they were put up to do it. It wasn't their own idea. Had tuberculosis, and so they're like, "Well, we're gonna die anyway." So boom, boom, right? Which then, so it's not saying that tuberculosis caused World War I, but it's kind of through all facets of our life, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, there's a bunch of examples, but fast forwarding to why I'm bringing this together is that tuberculosis is still around. It's very expensive to treat. It's not common in the U.S. It's common in places like Africa, which don't have resources, right? So third world countries. So the disease is where the treatment is not, and the treatment is where the disease is not. And some people were saying that's likely by design.
Interesting.
Right. And then tuberculosis is contagious. And so, yeah.
You know, when we in the Army, you deploy and you get your TB test, and then you come back and you get a TB test. When we went to Afghanistan and came back, one of our guys came back positive for tuberculosis. I was like, man, I didn't even know people could get that anymore.
I had a patient here in Florida who had it.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, it's all over the place in Afghanistan, specifically. Iraq wasn't the same, but Afghanistan. Yeah. And I think also when I was there, we spent so much time with the Afghans that it naturally, of course, there'd be some cross-pollination there, if you will, for diseases like that. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. And I don't think there's any fancy treatment for tuberculosis in Afghanistan.
No, I mean, it's bacterial, so it's, it's a pretty aggressive treatment for it. I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's been a while. But
wild.
Anyway, just tying it along to where, something like tuberculosis is a bacterial. We have the treatment for it. We know it. It could be squashed, right? But it's not. And why? Because the treatment is rather expensive. Yeah, wonder why. Anyway, moving on.
Okay, moving on. So cancer and exercise. We got that one. I think there's obviously, guys, cancer is the number 2 killer in this country. And the prevalence of it just keeps rising and rising and rising, even though we have all this stuff to treat it, whatever. We may say that we're getting better at putting it into remission for more people, but the number of deaths still goes up year over year. And now the number of diagnoses is going up. So every year more and more people get diagnosed with it. They keep getting younger and younger, even though we have this slew of things that supposedly help you deal with it. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting case. We'll definitely keep talking about that a lot more. Okay, moving on. Next order of business. I want to talk about weed and alcohol. Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. Come on, let's go. I'm a Creed fan.
Creed.
If you guys didn't know, I've been a Creed fan since high school. And if you don't like Creed, then I don't like you. Okay?
Oh, wow.
That's aggressive. Anyway,
it's very aggressive.
Let's talk about weed and alcohol real quick. Because weed is, especially marijuana, the devil's lettuce, the reefers.
My goodness. So we were supposed to talk about this last week. Oh, which by the way, this is the first podcast we've done from the last 3 where I'm not on call. So that's exciting. So I'm not super distracted. So I apologize for previous episodes. And also, we were going to talk about this last time. We had to cut one episode really short because we had a guest after. We started late, so we didn't get to this. But I had brought the book that had all the facts that I wanted to talk about, and I did not bring it today. My fault. So we're going to try to riff off the top of our heads here.
Well, not only that, but this is something that'll always come up because the weed, especially now, it's been married to the health space, right? You know, people taking weed to deal with anxiety and depression and pain and all these things. And it's the prevalence of the use of marijuana has become very, very common now, or it's higher.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, legalization had a lot to do with it and all that sort of things. Now, here's my thoughts on this, because I have partaken after the Army for sleep. That was the big thing. For years, I was completely against it. Obviously, you have to be stone cold. You know, you get drug tested in the military. You can't use weed for nothing. And they came out with a very strong stance on even something like CBD.
Mm.
So my thought on it was like, I was like, I don't want none of that. You know, I was looking down on it.
Mm-hmm.
I get out, sleep issues, you know, the trazodones and all the BS, that stuff is not for me. The VA's throwing all these weird medications on me to make my sleep better. And I mean, I just don't like the side effects of it, the way I felt. You know, I'm a very regimented person, and I go on something like trazodone, and yeah, I slept, and then the next day I'm worthless.
Mm-hmm.
Versus following my schedule, the things that give me peace. I'm reading, I'm doing all this, being productive. If I take the stuff, I'm not productive the next day. Once I identified that pattern, I'm like, this isn't for me. I guess I should say I have sleep issues. It's not nightmares. It's not PTSD. It's not any of that. I came back from my first deployment, and I don't know if I was exposed to something. I probably was. You know, you're out there in the desert. Stuff is crazy. But my sleep just deteriorated in a way. You know, I'm waking up more during the night, tossing and turning more. I can fall asleep fast, but I can't stay asleep. It was crazy. I'm snoring more, that sort of thing, like apnea type symptoms, even though I'm super lean, that sort of thing. So it's been a struggle over the years to get it better. And little by little, we found ways. You know, Janie helped me with some stuff, and I'm still working on it. But weed is like, hey, let's take some edibles. You know, other veterans were doing it. I was like, okay, I'll give this a try because I want to sleep. And it did work. It was, you play around with certain strands, you take that, you fall asleep. Now, there's an argument there that you're passing out. You're not necessarily actually sleeping. So yes, you slept more, but the quality of the sleep is compromised because you took something that kind of messes with your REM and your sleep cycle and all that stuff. Kind of akin to getting drunk and passing out and going to sleep. Right? Which we'll get into alcohol here in a second. So here's my contention with weed, where I stand with it now. I don't use it, and I'll tell you why here in a second. I think the design of marijuana, when it's closer to its natural state, there's a lot of benefits there, you know, and it's been used for cancer treatments. It's been used for antidepressant.
It's been used for cancer
stuff.
Side effect management.
Exactly. Yeah. For chemo side effect, yes. Like opening people's appetite and that sort of thing. So CBD for pain management,
inflammation,
you know, and inflammation. I'll tell you too that I would rather douse myself in CBD. I'd rather drink it, put it in eye drops, bathe in it, boom, do all of that than go on opiates. That's my personal stance on it. Like for pain management, I would rather just have overdose on CBD before I take an opiate. My personal stance again. But there's all these benefits to it that we're like, man, you know, you want to partake. Now, here's what's happening with weed. I think it's been corrupted badly. The marijuana you have now is a GMO, highly genetically modified. You know, that's how you have these 300 strains. Used to be, you got an indica, you got a sativa, you know, this one's an upper, this one's a downer, boom, 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 done. So the weed that your grandpappy was smoking at Woodstock is not the weed that the kids are smoking these days. What you're
Yeah.
smoking now, and even if they're smoking it, they're dabbing it, they're, the edibles, there's all this vaping it.
Yeah, vaping it, which is terrible.
Worse than smoking it,
And it's much more potent.
Yeah, way more potent. Like, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's a night and day difference, the THC concentration between what they're using now and what they used to use. Whereas before, I think what the figures that I've heard, it was like you were getting like a 30% hit of THC. Now you're getting 95, 96% hit of THC with the weed now. Why? It's been genetically modified to have this super high content of THC. Then they're making all these strands, so the flowers are different. It's highly modified. On top of that, then we're talking about the pesticides that they're using in a lot of the mass production to keep this weed, to grow it. And the fertilizers and stuff. You're talking about atrazine and all these things that have very harmful effects on us, kind of like glyphosate. So these things, they're growing. They're not growing out in the sun in some hillside. They're growing more in these grow houses with these fake lights. And so they can grow them quicker. And they're spraying the crap out of them with atrazine or whatever. And what you have now is not only a higher hit of THC, but a way more toxic product than, the stuff that Grandpappy used to smoke that used to grow on some hillside in Colombia, or Mexico or wherever.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think?
So the mechanism of delivery is a lot. So it's way more accessible now, right, than it was previously. And if you think back in like the 60s and 70s, use of it was more recreational. Okay. So it'd be like, let's go to this concert and like smoke some weed. Let's go to, you think of like Woodstock, like whatever, right? Okay. Now, all too often, I see, especially younger people, it's daily, like they're vaping it, they're smoking it, they're eating it. It's they're daily dosing, okay? And some, it's natural, it's better than being on Prozac or something like that. And, yes and no. But the thing is that we're just, especially with marijuana, it's a hit to the dopamine centers, right? It's like, it's messing with our pain-pleasure balance. It's getting us out of equilibrium, and our body is always trying to seek homeostasis, equilibrium. And so to me, if you're dosing weed every day, why? Because it's not addressing the root cause, right? And that's what time after time we need to address the root cause. Let's give an example. Okay, I had my surgery and I was in a lot of pain, and they had sent in hydrocodone for me, I think, just post-operatively, and I didn't really want to take it, so I was like, I'll be fine. I'll just do some ibuprofen and Tylenol. But the pain was Dan can attest this. I usually am not a huge complainer. Like I'll be like, this hurts, right? But I was like out of sorts with this pain, and to the point where I took some opioids. Didn't really help, and Dan's like, I don't want you to take opioids. I'm gonna get you some weed. It helped, right? But why did I have pain? Was it because of the surgery? Actually, it wasn't. It was because they had put the boot and the wrap on too tight, and it actually, I had a pressure sore developing from it. That was painful. Had I loosened my boot and the wrap, I wouldn't have been in pain. But yet I was medicating myself because that my fault. I didn't know. Plus they said, don't remove the boot, don't remove the wrap for, 1 week. So I didn't, highly paranoid about messing up the skin graft. So I didn't want to touch anything. But just that example as if you are doing weed every day because you're so anxious, you're so this, you're so that, but we're not addressing the root cause. And I would argue that you dosing something every day, whether it be weed or Xanax or whatever, you're actually raising your threshold of what you need to help with your anxiety. Therefore, your anxiety is being worse. And also with something like marijuana or any drug, but marijuana, because the smell of it, are people going to judge you for it or shame you for it? So now you're like, okay, or if you're a kid in school, when are you going to be able to get your next hit? Okay, when can I get my next hit? How do I plan this? Now we're developing anxiety of when can you do it? When's my next one coming? And maybe even paranoia. Are people going to smell it? Things like that. So can you see how we're just developing more of a psychological issue even though we're taking something to help.
Well, the delivery mechanisms now through edibles and vapes and things like that are you can smoke weed whenever you want now.
Right. And the
you can
vaping,
take a dab whenever you want, and nobody's gonna know.
Terrible for lung function. Yep. Terrible.
So in back in the day,
I have a patient right now who has asthma, and he's like, my inhaler's not working, and I'm like, what are you vaping? Because I could just smell it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, marijuana. I'm like, okay, what mode are you doing it in? Are you eating it? What are you doing? He's like, I'm vaping it. You're vaping every day, but you say your inhaler's not working. I'm sorry. I think your inhaler could be effective, but we don't know because you're vaping every day.
Yeah, so you're literally...
It's very toxic to the lung because what else is in that vape material? Do we know? Is it documented? I don't know. I mean, cigarettes, we know that they have a ton of things in them that cause inflammation in the lungs. What's in your vape pen? And so it's...
You remember that recall they did on vapes like a couple years ago?
Yeah, because it was causing... popcorn lung, blebs. Yeah. I had a patient who had it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, weren't you paying attention? Bruh.
Yeah.
And here we are vaping still. Oh, they made them better. Listen, the vape, I mean, it's super convenient. It sounds like super like, oh, this is great. It doesn't smell. No, it smells. I can smell it on you. But it's obviously way less obvious than smoking a blunt. Now back in the day, you had to hide somewhere so you could light your little joint or your little blunt. And you had to do a whole plan like, hey, we're going to go over here, nobody's gonna be around there. Boom, we can light up, we can do our thing. Or you're at a concert or something and everybody's smoking, so it doesn't matter. But it was an event and you can only do it so often, right? Now you can walk around with a vape pen around the mall and you're taking hits of weed at 90-something% THC and you're really hitting yourself with it. Makes sense? So, and like you're saying, there's a tolerance level that gets developed, okay? Now, with that in mind, there's also things coming out saying that people, when you're under the age of 25, your brain isn't fully developed, right? Your brain doesn't fully mature until you're 25 or older, especially for men. Ladies, you have an advantage there. So they're basically saying that if you're smoking marijuana prior to that process completing itself, you are putting yourself at a greater risk for mental brain type issues, meaning reduced IQ, things like psychosis, depression, anxiety. You're at an increased risk because this stuff is affecting the way your brain is finishing its growth process, right?
And I know that there's a big chicken versus egg argument for psychotic breaks with schizophrenia because it usually happens in men in their late teens, early 20s. And there is some prevalence of drug use, but is it because the schizophrenia is already occurring and they're seeking drugs to like quiet that, right? Or is their drug use precipitating a psychotic break? Yeah. So I think that there's evidence pointing to both things. So I don't know which one wins out.
It's an interesting concept because anxiety and depression are like this also rising phenomenon in our society. I'm not saying that weed alone is to blame for this because obviously, blue lights, interrupted circadian rhythm, lack of physical health, lack of exposure to sunlight, all these things, shitty food, all these things can play a part in developing the anxiety and depression type thing. And then obviously, things that happen in life. So there's a lot of factors, but there's also a very direct correlation between early marijuana use and then the onset of this severe depression and anxiety type stuff later in life. Now, I'll use a anecdotal example here from one of my clients who we want to have on the podcast because he's got a fascinating story. Oh, yeah. Ryan, shout out Ryan. He battled addiction in his life, overcame it, and now he's a counselor. He helps other people with their addiction, and he's a phenomenal, like this man, he's evolved, very evolved emotionally, intellectually, like a very evolved person. And he high level thinker and he helps a lot of people with addiction. And his observation is like, okay, a lot of the people that we deal with, I'm not dealing with cocaine. I'm not dealing with heroin, which is what you would expect to be dealing with in rehab scenarios. He's like, I'm dealing with psychosis brought on by extensive use of marijuana early on. And now we're dealing with these people that their brains are not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're in these messed up loops of anxiety and depression because they started smoking weed every day at 13, you know?
Yeah.
And now they're 21 and they have their mental health is messed up.
Yeah. And also I would say that they possibly didn't develop coping mechanisms to deal with depression and anxiety because it's not just like there's some people who are immune to depression and anxiety. Everybody has some feelings of being depressed or some feelings of being anxious at some point in their life. That's natural, right? It doesn't mean they have depression or they have anxiety. But if at a young age, you're not developing these coping mechanisms, so therefore you never, if we think pleasure versus pain, if you never experience pain and then learn how to process that, you just like any sort of pain, like, oh, here's weed to make me feel better, to swing back over to pleasure, right? Then it becomes harder for you later in life if you're an adult, way more pain, right? But more things happen and you don't know how to cope. And now you need more and more to swing back to that pleasure. And so that could drive anybody crazy. So I think that with anything, if you're relying on it as a crutch and it's more determining how you feel, then you're not developing processes of how to feel, at balance within yourself.
Yeah. And this is something, like weed is becoming more and more acceptable. And I mean, I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent or with kids that I interact with, like, through training and stuff, like young athletes, man, stay away from that stuff. You're too young. Well, if you're 26 years old and you want to smoke a little weed, do your thing. It's America. It's a free country, whatever. But because your brain is not going to be affected the same way. Makes sense? Right. As if you're 20, 18, 16, and you're partaking in this stuff. I think the consequences, what's at stake now, is way higher, way more risky than it was when we were teenagers and sneaking off to try to smoke a little weed. You know what I mean?
I didn't do that. But
you didn't do? You see, she married. Listen.
Well, no. So different thing. So my real father was a heavy drug user, including weed. So I was very fearful of it until probably my 20s because my association was weed and all that stuff that came along with him. And so I didn't dabble in it when I was younger at all because that was no thank you.
And then she married this rebellious man that just wanted to be in trouble all the time.
No.
Thank you, Army, for saving me.
Different type of trouble. Your trouble, very different type of trouble.
Yeah, but I just think what's at stake these days, especially the younger you are, it's too risky, man. I would definitely stay away from it. Here's the other reason why I'm not gonna call weed this, like the health benefits of weed are starting to be overshadowed by the GMO processes of it, by the amount of THC that it's giving you now. So, and here's the other one. You see how legalization is starting to happen in a lot of places, California, Seattle, Washington State,
so
Oregon.
Colorado, right? And they made a bunch of money right after they legalized it.
Yeah,
what?
They spent it all.
Okay.
Now they have, not only did they spend it all, they had this huge surplus of money. It was like $100 billion that the legalization of marijuana brought on. Now they're at a deficit and they have a junkie problem. Mm. Now, this brings in the argument, which we're not going to have today, but it's an interesting conversation of, is marijuana a gateway drug? Mm. Like they've been telling us since we were little kids in the DARE program and all this stuff. But all that to say that the places that have legalized have had some issues with the societal fabric kind of taking a hit. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was clean. Now they have more junkies. They have more petty theft. That crime kind of came up with the legalization. Colorado's probably one of the best examples because they were a really quiet state until they decided to legalize. Then you could look at places like Washington, with the issues they have in Seattle, and then forget about California. That place is going to fall into the ocean at some point.
Gosh.
But there's a deeper conversation there.
Yeah.
This is the benefits that marijuana might have had are starting to get overshadowed by the risks and
processing of it.
the processing of it.
It's weird. It's almost like the more you process food, the worse it gets.
Yeah, if we were still smoking that marijuana that was growing in nature on the sunny hillside in Mexico somewhere that, was minimally sprayed, freaking 100% organic, that stuff, we might have a different story in our hands. Be like, hey, guys, you definitely want to take this little edible with 2 ingredients on it, and it'll help you this in this way. Now we're having this conversation of it's sprayed with atrazine. It's freaking GMO'd to the high heavens to give you a more potent THC burst. I'm not even going to get into the Chinese grow operations that are even more toxic. And then what the legalization efforts, you see that they're blocked in some places. They pass them in some places. Here's, you heard it here first, guys. If you haven't heard it anywhere else, here's my theory for the future on marijuana. You will get big pharma marijuana at some point.
Yeah.
You're going to get Pfizer edibles and Moderna freaking vapes and all this you're going to get it. That's coming.
And then it's going to be more expensive.
Yep.
Which is going to drive up the street sales of it. And then you worry about fentanyl.
If you think that, they're claiming all these medical benefits of marijuana, and you think for a second that Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca and all these companies are not getting ready to come out with their own grow operations and their own brands of pharmaceutical grade marijuana, you're crazy.
Yeah.
That stuff is already in the works. It's probably ready. They're just sending out their armies of lobbyists to lobby in all these other states so we get a federal level legalization of marijuana, and boom, here's your Pfizer weed, guys. Don't buy it from Joe at the local dispensary anymore. Buy it from me at CVS, So that's another reason to, hey, maybe you might want to leave weed behind. Okay.
So I think weed is a little bit easier for people to wrap their heads around. Like, yeah, I can see the pros and cons of it. Yeah, I understand. I think harder is alcohol.
Yep. Moving on to alcohol now. So alcohol, super socially acceptable. Yep. And here's the argument that a lot of the weed heads would make that it actually, I agree with it 100%. He's like, I've never seen anybody get high, smoke a joint, and then go home and beat their wife.
No, they just forget to pick their kids up.
Exactly. They could forget to pick. Exactly. Because they're out there munching themselves to death and chilling and thinking about, is the sky blue and white or is it white and blue? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
But alcohol does have that, and it happens every day. I drank a fifth of whiskey. I went home and beat my wife, beat my kids. I did all this violent stuff. So that argument holds water that, the effects of alcohol, people intoxicated with alcohol are a little bit, violence tends to be more common, tends to cause more issues than the effects of being intoxicated with marijuana.
Decreased inhibitions, right? So it increases your inhibition to want to go talk to that person, right? To want to just let loose on the dance floor, right? To maybe not take out your anger on other people with violence, so it decreases inhibitions across the board. You don't get to choose your own adventure on that. Now, I think the biggest thing, the relationship with alcohol and marijuana and anything else is that people are using it to treat something, whether they know it or not, right? And so, you're a veteran. I'm sure you've seen a lot of veterans, maybe like the more historical ones, who utilize alcohol to treat their PTSD. And then the violence comes out through that, right?
Dear Lord, I got to tell you, man, and
I think that's the one easiest to grab onto because that's depicted in a lot of movies.
Yeah, and here's the thing with that. Military guys, the military historically is a drinking culture. Yeah. I was in the cavalry. The cavalry is notorious for its drinking. The Navy, the sailors are big drinkers. The Marines, and you tie military functions to drinking, grog bowls, if you know what I'm talking about, where we drop in all this liquor at a unit function to represent things in the history of the unit, and you make this big old tub that you put a boot in there. It's fun. It's a fun thing, and it's very fratty in a good way. It's very fraternal. It creates unit cohesion, and it's a blast. When you have these unit functions and you do a grog bowl, and then you go, if you break protocol in the function, then you get punished by having to take a hit of the grog, and then you got to do push-ups. It's fun. Guys, I loved it. It was fun. But, because you come from that, then you get out, and, if you're dealing with PTS and all this other stuff, you revert back to that. And, you're drinking on the weekends with your buddies, which I have a history with this. I've drank a lot while I was in the military. Fridays and Saturdays, I was litty, litty. But anyway, you start recurring to that to deal with something like PTS or feeling down because you're no longer in the military, feelings of inadequacy and loss of purpose, which are very common in the veteran community.
Loss of community,
loss of the brotherhood. And, you go back to the drinking and
because you associate that with, I felt good.
Yep.
So let me do this to try to feel good. Yeah.
And that is an explosive combination in the worst of ways. Like if you're feeling down, and I tell this to civilians, if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with depression, the quickest way to stay in that loop is by injecting alcohol into it.
Yes. And a lot of people do try to manage their specifically anxiety with alcohol because it's a downer, right? I remember dealing with a patient who his liver was shot. He comes in yellow. And I'm like, you have to quit drinking. And he did because he had to, no choice. Well, his other choice would be to die. But he quit drinking and his anxiety shot up through the roof because he was utilizing alcohol to manage anxiety. And unfortunately, we just had to get through that time, right? Because the anxiety is going to swing up because what you were using took it away, you took away what you were using to help manage it. A lot of people also utilize alcohol for sleep or to come down from wind down, right? As like an outlet, which, okay, so this is where, if you're going to go have a glass of wine with like your girlfriends or your guys, and it's like a sense of community and it's, just kind of like one and done fine. But if you're going out and getting belligerent recurrently, then it goes back to in a previous episode, what Dan was talking about with men, like, are your ride and dies just drinking buddies, right?
You conflate drinking buddies with actual friends.
But, and Dan and I spoke on with this woman about specifically using alcohol for stress management and how that's not good for you health-wise, mentally, physically, emotionally. And I think it's when you start to rely on something and then it starts controlling you and your day and your schedule, that's when it becomes a problem, even if you're not getting drunk or intoxicated from it.
Yeah, I think for me, so going back to the military days, my last job was really high stress. Like I was commanding a company. That's a lot of people. And there's a lot of responsibility. The burden of command really is on your shoulders. And I was sleeping very little at that time. Some of it by design, like I did it to myself, and some of it because of the nature of the job. And the weekends, I just wanted to rage. Like, I'm like, give me the bottle of wine. I want to drink the whole thing. Then I'm going to drink some more after that. I want to go out. I want to party. I want to drink all night to, like, quote unquote, kill the stress.
Mm-hmm.
But what was happening was Sundays were terrible days. Yep, because I was,
scaries.
Sunday scaries. And I didn't know what it was. I thought, I'm waking up later in the day because I'm nursing from freaking staying out late. I'm not being productive. I'm feeling like super anxious, super, super off. And I never knew what it was, but I just ride with it until next Friday, and then rage again. And then I'm in this vicious cycle every weekend. I carried that over into civilian life. I carried that habit into civilian life. Hey, Friday and Saturdays, we rage. And then Sundays, I'm like, why am I so nervous? Why am I so anxious? You made that connection first, that you're like, I think it's the drinking. Like it's brought on by the Sunday scaries. And there is actual relationship there to increase feelings of anxiety after the consumption of alcohol. Like this is scientific, and I can't point to the study right now, but there is something there. We're not even talking about the biochemistry of alcohol, like how your body has to process it and all that stuff, which actually proves that, alcohol is actually, it's toxic. I don't care if it's wine of the highest quality, which I love wine.
And the metabolite, how your body breaks it down, the metabolites of that are highly toxic to our body. So when you ingest, and so for health, just to switch over real quick to health reasons, if your goal is to improve your health, whether or not you need to lose weight, alcohol can directly counteract that. Because if you have, say you have, you're eating a meal and you have wine, the liver will stop metabolizing other things and prioritize the alcohol because it is toxic and it needs to get it out first.
Yep.
Okay. It's also, alcohol will make you lose fluids. So it's a diuretic. So you're going to pee more. So you're going to be dehydrated. Okay. So your body's stopped metabolizing other things to prioritize alcohol. You're dehydrated. And also your blood sugar drops. It can
goes
also
up like this, and then
it can also alcohol can also increase your hunger cues. So let me know how all those things
line up with
help with your goal to lose weight.
Yeah, with body composition issues.
And then before you all go, well, GLPs help with alcohol because they help decrease my desire for alcohol. They do. I've seen that studies that show it. I've also observationally had people tell me this, that it does. But why were you consuming alcohol to begin with? Why do you notice that it's decreased now? Why were you consuming it so much? And so that's what I would look on. Okay, I'm not going to get into the argument or whether or not that's good or bad that it does. I do think that any time a medication that's not intended to mess with your mood, you're opening Pandora's box. Because if it can cause improvements, it can also cause not improvements. And so we just need to be careful with that.
Yeah, and there with it, you just went through kind of the biochemistry of why.
And you said we weren't going to get into
alcohol is issue, but people need to know that's like the wave tops of it, So basically, there are studies out there.
Well, I just know some people are going to care more about aesthetics, and so if that's what you're here for, then right there's your example.
Yeah, body composition is important though. We obviously want to carry more muscle and less fat. There are studies also that point to the fact that the fat burning process stops because your body's focused on the alcohol and getting rid of the alcohol. So there's a lot there to not drink, but when we start talking about the anxiety and depression and all this other stuff, there's definitely a lot of reason there to not drink.
Yeah.
I think if you're trapped in an anxiety cycle and depression cycle, which listen, we all deal with dumps in moods and we all deal with anxiety over certain things, but you want to get to the point where your anxiety is brought on by an event. Not so that you're waking up and you're already caught in this cycle. Be like, hey, I'm anxious because I got to go speak somewhere, or I'm anxious because I got this, evaluation at work or something, versus I just woke up and I'm already feeling like this.
Yeah. And I also think, so I have some people push back and say, well, how am I supposed to go out and meet people if I can't drink? How am I supposed to go to these events if I can't drink? I need this to do this. And I'm like, the fact that you need it to go just be yourself, how is that not a red flag? Okay. And then maybe you need to dig into some things. The other thing is, and you and I have both done this, like you said, when you have, you feel anxious because of something that happened the day, you reach for it as a fix and I think we've done this now. We've gotten to the point, or we did, because we've stopped drinking, and you tell people oh, we really don't drink. Oh, congratulations. Oh, no, I didn't, I don't think I wasn't an alcoholic, but I just chose to not drink. It's not like I needed congratulations for it. Now, will we still have alcoholic beverages? Sure. When we went to Croatia, we had a beer with dinner one night.
Yeah, we wanted to try their beer.
And so it's
and that comes with, one, you catch a little buzz off of the one beer. Two, I know that I'm not going to sleep the same because the sleep is that's where you see how alcohol, I fall asleep and then I'm awake in the middle of the night.
Yeah, because processing it raises your body temperature and you don't sleep as well when your body temperature is raised. Anybody who's perimenopausal, postmenopausal, or women in your luteal phase when your body temperature raises, let me know how your sleep is during that time. So anyway, when we stopped drinking alcohol on the weekends and stuff, I would say that there were some times where if we had a stressful day, you learned how to be uncomfortable and process that. And it's you're oh, okay, now you have a bad day, you have a stressful event, you have some anxiety, you're feeling down. Can you sit with it? Can you be with yourself when you're not happy and carefree? And can you accept yourself and start to work through that?
Man, and you actually learn some healthier coping mechanisms. I'm going to go outside for a 20-minute walk.
Or when Nick was here, it's not inappropriate to feel down for a day or two and to be with that and give that emotion it's due time and the ability to process it, you know?
Yeah. You got to you get to deal with it versus just putting it in the back burner.
I think we're so afraid as society to feel like, I can't feel sad. I can't feel this. I need to be happy, 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 happy. Where it's like, we have emotions for a reason. Let them have their moment, work through it, and then move forward.
Yep.
And I understand.
And then
there are going to be some people like, there are actual disorders and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just, regular emotions day to day.
Yeah. And then we talk about, this kind of touches on social connection too. Because like you said, if I don't drink, how am I supposed to meet people? That calls into question the value of these social connections if they're tied solely to drinking.
Yeah.
And consuming alcohol. That calls into, is that really the relationship that you want if it doesn't work if you don't have a drink in your hand?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's like, well, then are you hanging out with the people who you're meant to hang out with if only you can get along with them if you're drinking?
Yep.
Right? Because I would say now that we don't drink anymore, when I go to social events, I'm not big into small talk, well, just like the little things, like whatever. I want to get into some conversations. Like, let's talk about conspiracies or get into some deep stuff and things like that. And a lot of people don't want to do that. But then you find your tribe. I would say when we were at Summer Strong and Durrett, Tyson, you and I, and then Durrett's coach, we started talking about religion, and it was a great conversation. Mm-hmm. But you can't do that with everybody. But I would say that these guys are more our tribe than others.
Well, and lo and behold, they're all sober as well.
Yeah,
they don't really drink.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how that works out. Guys, all that to say, alcohol, long-term health plan, alcohol is not a part of it. Sorry. I know that's people gonna be like, oh my God, you're such a square, Dan. You're so square. You're so boring. How am I supposed to be fun? I can already hear you complain about it. It's not a part of it.
Yeah.
It's not a part of it. I'm not saying don't drink ever, but I'm saying like minimizing it, and especially the circumstances under which you're drinking. I'll recommend something. This is years ago when Janie and I got into like, man, I think the alcohol is what's giving us the Sunday scaries, the alcohol on Saturdays. And I'm like, you made that connection first. I'm like, yeah, I made this connection back in New York because I was going, financially, I wasn't where I wanted to be. Professionally, I wasn't where I wanted to be. So I had a lot of feelings of anxiety. Therefore, you're like, give me the beer. Yep, give me the wine. But what I discovered was, at least for myself, but I'm passing this on to you because I think there's something there. If there's a certain feeling, down feeling, low vibration feeling that is saying, hey, maybe you should reach for this little thing just to deal with it, to kind of attenuate what you're feeling a little bit. What I found was that the next day when I woke up, the feeling of anxiety or depression or low vibration state that I would have was worse than the one that led me to grab the drink in the first place.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And that's just something I want to leave you with. If you're struggling with feelings of anxiety and feelings of depression, and you're still partaking in alcohol as a way of dealing with it, I think, my personal opinion, I'm not some psychologist, but I think, and I also think the science would back me up on this, that you're contributing to you remaining in that state and getting caught in the cycle of, this is how I always feel down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, takeaway here, guys. Alcohol ain't a part of long-term health. Like, chronic use out, it's just not. Maybe you go out to somebody's birthday, you have one drink, cool, you enjoy this little glass of wine, you're on a trip, and you want to try their beer, that's fine. I'm not saying never drink. I'm just saying this whole drinking every weekend is probably not a part of that long-term health strategy.
Right.
What do you think?
No, I agree.
Okay, we definitely beat that into a pulp. So I think we can close with that.
Yeah.
Any parting thoughts, ma'am?
If you have any questions, comments, disagreements, critiques of this episode, things that we spoke on, because I do think with the alcohol thing, some people are going to have different opinions.
You guys are so boring.
No, it's be like, but so like in the blue zone, they drink out, so anything. So please let us know. We'd love to have further discussions on it if that's something you want us to go into more. It's not black and white. There is a gray area. It just depends on what are your goals. And if your goals are improving body composition, optimizing long-term health, alcohol likely needs to have a minimal or no role in your intake.
Another thing I want to say, I think I told you this years ago. I told you that, hey, listen, I'm going to not drink. But if you see me agree to a drink, it means that I'm feeling really good. So I'm starting from a different place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you're summer strong. Yeah, I want to have one of those beers because I'm in good company. We're having good conversations. I'll have the beer.
This New Year's, I did not have a drink because I was dealing with a bunch of things going on, and I just wasn't in a great headspace, and so I did not drink. I didn't even make that connection.
Yeah,
but I was just like,
go.
I don't feel like drinking.
And I had a glass of wine because we were having some badass beef at this restaurant in Phoenix. I was with my good friends from childhood, the true ride or dies. P.S. They don't drink either. Yeah. So I was the only one that said yes to a glass of wine.
Carla had a drink.
Oh, Carla, she did. Better. So, I said yes. I said, I'll have a glass of wine. This is a great moment. I feel good. Yes, I'll have a glass of wine. So that's a different thing when you're coming at it from, I'm down, let me have it, versus, man, this is a great moment. Like, it's a wedding, we're celebrating, I feel good. I'll say yes to it.
That's a good point.
So yeah, there you go, guys. Hey, listen, questions, comments, concerns, send us something at info@Achieve the Lifestyle. DM us on Achieve the Lifestyle on Instagram.
And don't forget to rate, review, and comment, right? Rate, review, comment on our podcast.
Subscribe.
That too.
Check out the website. Check out the website, achievethelifestyle.com. Guys, if you know somebody that needs help getting their lifestyle in order so that they can maximize their health, whether you're at day 0, you have no idea how to get healthy, or you're already in the process and you're doing too much, we can help you too.
Yeah. Or you want your work to create a better environment for you to have an easier chance to be healthier. I just need to not say words. Let us know, and we can maybe reach out to them or have them reach out to us.
Yeah, and that's what we're here for, guys. It's a long road, big processes to get healthier and make everybody healthier, because this is just about you. Hopefully we get one person healthier and that person helps 2 get healthier, and then we start changing this whole mess that we're in this country health-wise. So we're here for it.
Yeah.
With that, we're out, guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the PharmaPhobic podcast. If you found this conversation interesting, which I know you did, make sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And also make sure to check us out on Instagram @Achieve the Lifestyle. And if you're interested in pursuing a stronger, healthier, more capable version of yourself, check out our website @achievethelifestyle.com.
The PharmaPhobic podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute medical, legal, or professional advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider before making any medical or wellness decisions. While we discuss pharmaceutical, holistic, and alternative health topics, our content is not a substitute for professional medical guidance.